Residents of a neighbourhood of the Venezuelan capital, Caracas, this Friday detained another mercenary involved in the foiled incursion into the country. About 8,000 more people in the United Kingdom have died in their own homes since the start of the coronavirus pandemic than in normal times, as concerns grow over the number avoiding going to hospital. Official data has shown that COVID-19 infections among medical personnel in Pakistan have increased by 75%, with over 500 health professionals infected. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Katrina Goss. Venezuelan Vice President of Communications Jorge Rodriguez this Friday shared details of the contract signed to attack Venezuela and overthrow the legitimate government of Nicolas Maduro.
This contract will go down in history as the most infamous action that any person has ever perpetrated against a country, against his own country, but not even in the world history of treason. Of the many devious actions throughout the history of humankind, had something the likes of this been seen, that a person would dare to sign a contract with a foreign occupying force that covers assassination, the elimination of a constitution, the elimination and abolition of the sovereignty of the Republic, the assassination of political adversaries, including the President of the Republic and leaders of the Venezuelan Revolution.
Residents of a neighbourhood of the Venezuelan capital detained another mercenary this Friday. According to the official Twitter account of the Integral Strategic Defence Region of the National Bolivarian Armed Forces for Caracas, the mercenary was captured by residents of Petaquirito neighbourhood in the parish of Cayayaca. Venezuelan Minister of Defense Vladimir Padrino Lopez congratulated the people of Petaquirito on his Twitter account and added, "What we are seeing in Venezuela is a true expression of patriotism, as the people and the National Bolivarian Armed Forces are fully conscious of who their true enemies are." Meanwhile, those arrested in the attempted armed incursion into Venezuela are to be brought before the country's courts, thus guaranteeing respect for due process and their human rights. Among the crimes they are to be charged with by the Public Prosecutor's Office are conspiracy with a foreign government, which has already been proven. In addition, the Venezuelan and foreign mercenaries are accused of terrorism, treason, rebellion, illicit trafficking in weapons of warfare, financing of terrorism, and criminal conspiracy. Various studies have predicted that Brazil is set to become the next global epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic. Brazil now has the 8th highest number of confirmed cases in the world, but experts have warned for months of massive underreporting in the country. Using data from the Health Ministry, researchers from several Brazilian universities estimate that the real number of infections is somewhere between 1.6 and 2 million instead of the official tally of over 141,000. Meanwhile, local governments in Brazil have warned of a lack of medical supplies to face the health crisis, while President Jair Bolsonaro continues to insist on lifting any restrictions and reopening the economy. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has announced the country's capital has reached the peak of its coronavirus outbreak, while Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard reported that the country has agreed to participate in a global initiative in search of a potential COVID-19 vaccine.
The European Union, World Health Organization and other global groups have called for a global, worldwide effort so that research institutions in each country can work together on research for potential vaccines. Mexico participated in it. We are joining that initiative. The goal is that the development of a vaccine be reached, first, as soon as possible. Second, but equally important, that it be publicly available. In other words, the main agreement of this initiative that I am receiving is that the subsequent vaccine be made available to everyone.
University students, professors and workers in Ecuador have protested against the budget cuts imposed by the government of President Lenin Moreno. Rowing mass students, professors and employees of the leading state universities in Ecuador went out to protest the cut that slashes $98 million from the budget for higher learning institutions. They stressed the measure would force university authorities to lay off more than 6,000 lecturers and harm students' academic development. This week, the National Assembly's Education Committee decided to initiate proceedings to impeach Finance Minister Richard Martinez, arguing that the move was unconstitutional.
The National Union of Educators condemns the $300 million cut for education because it means that more than 165,000 children and youth will be left without their right to continue studying. It also means the dismissal of over 6,000 teachers who are left practically destitute and on the streets without being able to bring their families their daily bread. It also means that 5,600 budgetary jobs of teachers who have retired have not been replaced. Therefore, we strongly reject it because it violates Article 165 of the Constitution.
More stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. About 8,000 more people in the United Kingdom have died in their own homes since the start of the coronavirus pandemic than in normal times, as concerns grow over the number avoiding going to hospital. Of that total, 80% died of conditions unrelated to COVID-19, according to their death certificates. Doctors' leaders have warned that fears and deprioritisation of non-coronavirus patients are taking a deadly toll. The United Kingdom continues to be ranked fourth in the world in terms of the number of coronavirus cases reported at over 211,000, while its COVID-19 death toll of more than 31,000 is the second highest in the world, only surpassed by the United States. England leads the figures with more than 66,000 cases, followed by Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. France will gradually end its lockdown from Monday, May 11th. However, French authorities announced that some restrictions will remain in place in the Paris region, where the novel coronavirus continues to spread.
It is in the long term that we will succeed in controlling the circulation of the virus and the epidemic. I am confident that we will collectively demonstrate this discipline and responsibility. Progressive deconfinement must not be a sign or a mark of a relaxation of our vigilance. On May 11, therefore, 400,000 businesses will reopen. 400,000 businesses representing 875,000 jobs, 77,000 hairdressing salons, 33,000 clothing shops, 15,000 florists, 3,300 booksellers will reopen, and social and economic life will be able to restart.
The Spanish government has refused to grant permission to the Madrid region to loosen its coronavirus restrictions. The Spanish Health Ministry said the area in and around the capital was not yet ready to move to the next phase of the escalation of the lockdown. The decision came just 24 hours after the regional public health director resigned over the Madrid government's bid to loosen the lockdown from Monday, stressing that the move was not based on health criteria. Deputy Prime Minister Pablo Iglesias accused the region's Conservative president of playing with people's lives for political ends. Meanwhile, Barcelona's beaches opened for a short time from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Friday to allow people to swim and jog. The COVID-19 death toll in Spain has risen to over 26,000, while the number of diagnosed cases has reached more than 260,000, the second highest number in the world. This Thursday, May 7th, marked the first time since February 28th that the Chinese mainland reported zero imported cases of COVID-19. Chinese health officials informed that the number of current infections has dropped to 260, the lowest figure since January 20th. In total, China has reported almost 83,000 cases, while the death toll stands at over 4,000. Authorities have noted the country will continue to support the WHO's global initiative to develop a vaccine against COVID-19. During a top-level meeting chaired by President Xi Jinping, it was stressed that China will improve its capability in terms of responding to major public health emergencies based on the experience gained during this pandemic. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying stressed that Taiwan's attempt to join the World Health Organization under the pretext of combating the COVID-19 pandemic is an act of political manipulation and will not succeed. Chung Yin said Taiwan's claim that the WHO should escape from China's control and allow Taiwan to fully participate in the fight against the epidemic was intended to confuse public opinion. She stressed that the United Nations General Assembly adopted Resolution 2758 in 1971, specifying that the government of the People's Republic of China is the sole legitimate government that represents China and upholding the One China principle, and the fact that Taiwan is an inalienable part of the Chinese territory, as has been universally recognized in the international community. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has appealed for an all-out effort to end hate speech globally in the context of the coronavirus pandemic. As of Friday, the global COVID-19 death toll has surpassed 274,000, or more than 3.9 million people have been infected.
COVID-19 does not care who we are, where we live, what we believe, or about any other distinction. We need every ounce of solidarity to tackle it together. Yet, the pandemic continues to unleash a tsunami of hate and xenophobia, scapegoating and scaremongering.
And we're taking one last short break now, but stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. Official data has shown that COVID-19 infections among medical personnel in Pakistan have increased by 75%, with over 500 health professionals infected. As the number of COVID-19 cases continues to surge in Pakistan, the country's healthcare providers remain at great personal risk as they care for COVID-19 patients. A quarter of the infected medical staff were working in intensive care units. Doctors and paramedics in Pakistan have been appealing to the government to maintain the strict nationwide lockdown, stressing that the coming weeks will be critical. But authorities have decided to ease the lockdown starting from Saturday, stressing that the poorest sectors of society are suffering economic hardship. Nearly 40% of Pakistan's 212 million people live in poverty. Meanwhile, health officials said the government has to strike a balance between curbing the spread of the virus and fighting hunger in the country.
And nobody was prepared for it, not even the West. Very recently, there is an increase in the number of healthcare workers affected by this virus. Daniel, there are a few deaths also. Whatever decision the government is taking, either a complete lockdown or a partial lockdown in certain areas, or easing out the lockdown timings, that is for the best interest of the Pakistani nation and for the safety of their people. And definitely there are very good brains who are advising them.
The number of confirmed coronavirus cases across the African continent continues to grow, with the WHO regional director warning that a spike in numbers is likely to result in the wake of improved and increased testing. While the figures remain low in a number of countries, a sizable number have reported over 100 cases already, while South Africa, Algeria, Egypt, Morocco, Cameroon, Guinea, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Djibouti and Nigeria have confirmed more than 1,000 cases. South Africa has been praised by some analysts for its mass testing, which is thought to explain why it has reported one of the largest numbers of cases in the region, but relatively few COVID-19 fatalities. Meanwhile, the Kingdom of Lesotho is the only African country that has so far escaped from the pandemic. According to the World Health Organization, COVID-19 could kill up to 190,000 people across Africa if not contained. And South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has authorised the early release of low-risk inmates to combat the spread of COVID-19 in prisons. In a statement issued on Friday, the presidency said this special COVID-19 parole dispensation would apply to low-risk inmates who have already served their minimum sentence or who would approach this period in the next 5 years. Prisoners affected by this decision will not be pardoned or have their sentences remitted, but will be placed on parole and will continue to serve their sentence under the community correction system until they reach their respective sentence expiry dates.
On what types of crimes were committed by these offenders. They were all petty crimes, and one could describe it as crimes of need that was committed by these offenders. We have ensured that we had carefully scrutinized the categories as well as the individuals to ensure that there are no violent criminals as part of this group of offenders.
Uganda's Minister of Health announced that the country is extending its rapid COVID-19 testing program for 10 more days after the exercise was hampered by a lack of sufficient test kits and transport. Uganda has reported 101 coronavirus cases so far and no fatalities.
The American Tower Corporation has supported the Minister of Health with 345 million shillings to help in combating the spread of COVID-19. Uganda Virus Research Institute, a government entity at the forefront of the COVID-19 pandemic fight, is the main beneficiary of ATC financial support.
We chose test kits in particular because it's the first step towards fighting this pandemic. In order to test appropriately, confirm those who have the virus and those who don't have, in order to isolate those who need to be isolated in time. And since that's where there was a great need, and both in terms of the kits themselves being available, the high cost of the kits, we felt that is where we needed to channel our donation towards.
ATC is the leading tower company in Uganda and is currently involved in delivering wireless communications and broadcast network infrastructure.
Sometimes we have challenges with test kits. So donations towards test kits are highly valued by the Ministry of Health because it goes to support the core of the response.
Relatedly, the Uganda Communication Commission has lauded the frontline agencies and the media in the fight against the spread of the contagion COVID-19.
We would want to recognize and thank everybody. We know that it's been a sacrifice on everybody in terms of the individual, and various people have really contributed in different ways. The media has really been extraordinary in this fight of COVID. Making sure that people get good information, sensitize them, educate them, let us not get tired.
This was during the handover of an assortment of personal protective equipment to the national COVID-19 response effort. Meanwhile, the Minister of Health has extended the rapid COVID-19 test for 10 more days. This was after the exercise was hampered by inadequacy of test kits and vehicles.
And the testing is now going on. Yesterday, over 1,300 samples were run. Good enough, they were negative. But as you are aware, we already have 4 positives that the rapid assessment identified. 1 in Masindi, 2 in Chotera, and 1 in Rakai.
The ministry is also deploying the GenExpert machines to hasten the testing exercise of truck drivers at the borders.
Turnaround time with the GenExpert machines is a little shorter, basically 1 hour. And within 1 hour, we can run a good number of samples. And so we think and we believe that because currently the areas of potential danger are the border points of entry, but also the communities living along the border areas.
Dennis Igoa for UBC News.
The Russian Air Force held rehearsals in Moscow on Monday ahead of the traditional Victory Day parade, which will take place this Saturday in the Russian capital. The date marks the surrender of Nazi Germany in 1945. 26 million soldiers of the Soviet Union's Red Army were killed in the Second World War. Their sacrifice secured victory over Nazi Germany and halted the spread of fascism across the world. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this year's commemoration in Russia features an air show and fireworks. And we finish with a video of the preparations. Remember, you can get all the latest news on our website as well as on social media. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.